February 19, 1943. Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. Cold wind cuts through the jagged mountains as dawn struggles to break over the barren ridgelines. Dust hangs in the air, fine as ash. Somewhere in the distance, the low rumble of engines grows louder. German armor is moving. Inside a shallow foxhole, Private Daniel Harris of the U.S. 1st Infantry Division grips his M1 Garand tighter than he realizes. His gloves are stiff with sand and sweat. Around him, the line is uneven, some men crouched low, others peering nervously over rocks. There is no perfect formation here. No clean geometry. Just scattered Americans, dug in wherever the ground allowed. A whistle cuts through the wind. Armor. Front. The first silhouettes appear through the haze. Dark, angular shapes cresting the ridge. German Panzer III and IV tanks. Behind them, infantry moves with calculated spacing, disciplined, methodical. This is not their first battle. Not even close. These are veterans of the Afrika Korps under Erwin Rommel. And they expect this to be easy. They've fought the British for years now. Predictable artillery patterns, rigid formations, careful advances. The British are professionals. Clean. Structured. By the book. But today, something is off. A German sergeant raises his binoculars. The American line makes no sense. No clear defensive alignment. No consistent trench system. Just scattered resistance. Unorganized, he mutters. Amateurs. He signals forward. The first German shells land with terrifying precision. Explosions tear through the rocky slopes, sending shards of stone slicing through the air. A British unit might fall back, regroup, call for coordinated artillery. The Americans don't. Private Harris hears the explosion before he feels the shockwave slam into his chest. Dirt rains down. Someone to his left is screaming, but he doesn't look. Training dissolves in the chaos. Instinct takes over. Fire! Fire now! No officer gave that order. Yet rifles erupt all along the line. M1 Garands crack in rapid succession, their semi-automatic fire cutting through the battlefield with a speed German infantry isn't expecting. There's no synchronized volley, just relentless, overlapping bursts. It sounds chaotic, undisciplined, and deadly. A German infantryman drops mid-stride, confusion etched across his face. Another dives for cover, shouting orders that no one seems to follow cleanly. The spacing breaks. The rhythm falters. Why are they firing already? Someone shouts in German. They're too far. But the Americans don't wait for ideal range. They fire when they see movement. They fire when they feel threatened. They fire because hesitation feels more dangerous than waste. On the ridge, a German lieutenant watches through his scope, brow tightening. This isn't how it's supposed to go. British units would hold fire. They'd wait for command. Maintain discipline. These Americans? They're unpredictable. A second wave of German tanks rolls forward, machine guns rattling. Dirt kicks up in violent sprays as rounds chew into the hillside. One American position goes silent, wiped out in seconds. But then, from behind a rock outcrop far off to the right, far outside any logical defensive alignment, a lone American bazooka team opens fire. The rocket streaks across the battlefield, wild but fast. It slams into the side of a Panzer IV. The explosion is imperfect, but enough. The tank lurches, smoke pouring from its side. The turret hesitates. Inside, the German crew scrambles, disoriented. Where did that come from? There was no report. No coordinated strike. No warning. Just sudden violence from an unexpected angle. And that's when the Germans begin to realize something unsettling. These soldiers don't fight like professionals. They fight like men who refuse to follow the script. Private Harris reloads, the metallic ping of his empty clip ejecting into the dust. His hands shake, but he doesn't stop. Around him, the battlefield is no longer a line. It's fragments, pockets, chaos. And yet, the fire keeps coming. From everywhere. A German machine gun team sets up behind a rock formation, trying to establish control. Within seconds, 3 different American positions open up on them. None coordinated, none planned. But together. Overwhelming. The gun falls silent. The German advance slows. Not because of superior tactics. Not because of better positioning. But because the battlefield no longer behaves predictably. By midday, the pass is a storm of smoke, fire, and confusion. Orders are delayed. Units lose cohesion. German officers shout commands that don't match the reality unfolding in front of them. And for the first time in North Africa, something unexpected happens. The Germans hesitate. Not out of fear, but out of uncertainty. They cannot read the enemy. And in war, uncertainty kills. On a distant ridge, a staff officer scribbles notes, trying to make sense of the engagement. His report will later include a strange observation. The Americans lack discipline, yet their aggression creates constant pressure. They attack without pattern, making them difficult to counter. Back in the dust and noise, Private Harris doesn't know any of that. He just knows one thing. If he stops firing, he might not live another minute. And across the battlefield, hundreds of other Americans are thinking the exact same thing. No formation. No perfect coordination. Just relentless, individual action. And somehow, it's working. The myth of the Green American Army is beginning to crack. But this is only the beginning. Because the Germans are about to adapt. And when they do, the Americans will have to prove whether this chaotic aggression is a strength or a fatal weakness. February 22, 1943. The western exits of Kasserine Pass. The Americans are no longer holding the pass. They are streaming out of it. Columns of dust trail behind retreating vehicles. Wounded men cling to the sides of trucks. Others stumble on foot, rifles slung loosely, faces hollow with exhaustion. Units have dissolved into fragments. Infantry mixed with engineers, tank crews walking beside artillerymen. It looks like collapse. And in many ways, it is. But something is changing. At a temporary command post miles behind the front, a new kind of order is beginning to form. Maps are redrawn. Radios crackle with urgency. Officers argue, loudly, openly, sometimes angrily. This is not the quiet, rigid structure of European armies. This is adaptation in real time. Senior commanders begin to recognize the problem. The Americans' aggression and initiative are powerful, but without coordination, they bleed themselves out against a disciplined enemy. That has to change. Fast. New orders go out. Not perfect, not polished, but clear enough. Establish defensive lines. Anchor positions with artillery. Coordinate fire. And above all, control the chaos. Back near the regrouping lines, Private Harris finds himself pulled into a new defensive position. This time, it feels different immediately. There are officers present. Clear sectors assigned. Machine guns positioned with intent, not just wherever there's cover. Artillery observers set up behind them, scanning the terrain with binoculars and radios ready. "Hold your fire," a sergeant says firmly. Harris blinks. Hold fire? It feels wrong. Every instinct from the past 2 days screams at him to shoot the moment he sees movement. But now, he waits. Across the valley, German forces begin advancing again. Confident. Steady. Expecting more of the same scattered resistance. They move in formation. Disciplined. Predictable. But this time, the Americans are watching. Learning. A German squad crosses a ridgeline, silhouetted perfectly against the sky. Harris tightens his grip on the rifle. Still no order. His breathing slows. And now, the command cuts through the tension like a blade. And the entire line opens fire at once. The effect is immediate and devastating. Instead of scattered, premature shots, the Americans deliver a concentrated burst of fire at the exact moment the enemy is exposed. Multiple rifles. Machine guns. Even mortars joining in seconds later. The German squad is pinned instantly. Some drop. Others scramble for cover. But there is nowhere to go. For the first time, The Americans are controlling the timing. A German lieutenant watching from behind cover frowns. That was coordinated. It wasn't supposed to be. He signals for artillery, but before the rounds can land, American artillery answers first. Shells crash into German staging positions with surprising accuracy. The ground erupts. Dust clouds rise. And suddenly, the rhythm shifts. The Americans are no longer reacting. They're dictating. Back on the line, Harris feels it. The difference is almost physical. The fear is still there, but now it's focused. Directed. He's not just surviving anymore. He's part of something. A system. A plan. German forces attempt to flank the position, like they did before, exploiting gaps, isolating units. But this time, the gaps aren't as open. A reserve unit, held back deliberately, moves to intercept. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but intentionally. Gunfire erupts on the flank, disrupting the maneuver. The Germans pause, recalculate, and that hesitation, that brief, critical moment of uncertainty, is something they haven't felt since the first chaotic day. Only now, it's different. Because this time, the unpredictability is combined with structure. Aggression with control. A dangerous combination. By afternoon, the battlefield looks nothing like it did 2 days ago. The Americans are still rough around the edges. Orders are sometimes delayed. Units still act independently when they have to. But now, those actions are anchored to a broader strategy. A German sergeant shouts to his men, frustrated. They're not fighting like before. And he's right. Before, the Americans were chaotic. Now, they are adaptive. And adaptation, in war, is often more dangerous than perfection. Because it means the enemy is learning. Fast. Back at the command post, reports come in rapidly. Enemy advance slowed. Artillery effective. Units holding positions. It's not a victory. Not yet. But it's no longer a collapse. It's resistance. Organized. Deliberate. Growing stronger by the hour. Private Harris wipes sweat and dust from his face, barely recognizing the battlefield in front of him anymore. 2 days ago, he was firing blindly, reacting, surviving. Now, he waits. He listens. He fires when it matters. And as the sun begins to set over the jagged hills of Tunisia, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The Americans are changing. And for the Germans, that may be far more dangerous than anything they faced before. Because a disorganized enemy can be defeated. But an enemy that learns in the middle of battle? That's something else entirely. February 23, 1943. Night settles over the Tunisian battlefield. Cold returns quickly in the desert. The same ground that burned under the sun now leaches heat from the body. Silence creeps in, but it's never complete. Somewhere in the dark, engines idle. Metal clinks. A distant voice carries, then disappears. And between those sounds, there's something new. Restraint. In a shallow defensive position, Private Harris sits with his back against a rock, rifle across his lap. He isn't firing wildly anymore. He isn't scanning in panic. He's waiting. Around him, other Americans do the same. Machine guns are set, not scattered. Fields of fire overlap. Flares are ready, but not wasted. Even in the darkness, there's a structure now. A quiet understanding of who covers what and when. Across the valley, German troops prepare for another push. But their confidence isn't what it was. A German corporal checks his weapon, glancing toward the American lines. He's fought in Poland, France, against the British in North Africa. He knows how those battles feel. Predictable. Controlled. Even dangerous enemies had patterns. Rhythms you could study, anticipate, exploit. But this is different. They don't behave like the others, he mutters. His sergeant doesn't answer immediately. Because he knows it's true. The attack begins before midnight. German infantry advances cautiously this time, probing instead of charging. They expect resistance, but they don't know where it will come from, or how intense it will be. For a moment, nothing happens. No gunfire. No sudden American reaction. Just silence. The Germans move forward, step by careful step. And that silence, it's worse than chaos. Because chaos you can respond to. Silence forces you to guess. A flare suddenly bursts into the sky. Bright, blinding white. The battlefield is exposed in an instant. And the Americans strike. Not everywhere. Not randomly. But at specific points, where the Germans are most vulnerable. Machine guns roar to life, cutting across advancing units. Rifles follow, controlled, deliberate. Mortars begin landing just behind the German line, boxing them in, limiting movement. The Germans react quickly, diving for cover, returning fire. But something feels off. Again. Every time they try to regroup, another pocket of American resistance opens up. From a different angle, a different distance. It's not the same chaotic firing from before. It's layered, controlled unpredictability. A German squad attempts to flank a machine gun nest, moving low through a rocky depression. For a moment, it seems to work. Until an American squad, positioned further back and slightly higher, opens fire into the flankers. They weren't reacting. They were waiting, watching, anticipating. The maneuver collapses instantly. Verdammt! A German soldier shouts, pressing himself into the dirt. They're covering each other now. And that's the difference. Before, American aggression created pressure, but left gaps. Now, those gaps are closing. Not perfectly, but enough. On the American side, Harris reloads again, but his movements are calmer now. Faster. More deliberate. He hears shouting to his right, another unit calling out movement. Instead of panicking, he adjusts. Shifts slightly. Covers the angle. No one told him to. But he understands it now. This isn't just about firing. It's about fitting into the fight. The German advance slows again. Not because they lack strength. Not because they lack discipline. But because every move now carries risk. Not just from the front, but from angles they didn't expect. From timing they didn't predict. From soldiers who no longer act purely on instinct, but still aren't bound by rigid doctrine. A dangerous middle ground. By early morning, the attack loses momentum. German units pull back to reorganize. They've gained little ground, taken losses, and more importantly, they've lost certainty. At a forward German command position, an officer reviews reports from the night. He reads one line twice. Enemy behavior inconsistent. Combines discipline with irregular aggression. Difficult to anticipate. He sets the paper down slowly. Because that combination, that's the problem. Professional armies rely on predictability, even in their enemies. Patterns can be studied. Tactics countered. But the Americans are becoming something else. Not fully professional in the European sense. Not entirely irregular either. They are evolving. And for the German soldiers on the ground, that evolution feels like a growing threat. Because now, you can't assume they'll make mistakes. You can't assume they'll fire too early. You can't assume they'll break under pressure. And worst of all, you can't assume you understand them. Back on the line, as the first light of dawn returns, Private Harris exhales slowly. The night is over. For now. He looks out over the battlefield. Scarred, broken, littered with the remains of yesterday's fight. But something has changed. Not just in the terrain. In them. They're still tired. Still inexperienced. Still far from perfect. But they're learning. Faster than the enemy expected. And in war, that might be the most dangerous trait of all. Because an army that starts unpredictable, and then learns control, becomes something no textbook can fully prepare you for.